Tonight on 24, the return of military threats to the discourse between Iran and the United States. Simultaneously with the increased U.S. military presence in the region, the EU's foreign policy chief called for the continuation of nuclear diplomacy with Tehran. The Houthis threatened to impose an aerial blockade on Israel by repeating attacks on the country's airports. Israel resumed airstrikes on the positions of this group. And Netanyahu's private criticisms of Trump's policies on Iran and Syria. Behind the scenes, Netanyahu told his close associates that the words and actions of the U.S. president do not align.
From the Iran International Studio, this is 24 with Fardad Farahzad.
Viewers of Iran International in Iran and around the world, hello and good day. The foreign minister of the Islamic Republic has accused the Israeli prime minister of directly interfering in U.S. domestic policy, attempting to drag Washington into a new war in the Middle East. Abbas Araghchi has said that Netanyahu is recklessly dictating to Trump what to do in diplomacy with Iran. Araghchi has stated that if, as Trump has said, the goal is that the only thing Iran should not have is nuclear weapons, reaching an agreement is possible. Meanwhile, the spokesperson for Iran's foreign ministry has also called Trump's new stance and the U.S. Secretary of State's remarks about the necessity of dismantling Tehran's nuclear program misleading.
Iran's peaceful nuclear program has a long history. It dates back to the 1970s. And at that time, everyone knows that both our fossil resources were more abundant than today and our needs were less. Even now, everyone witnessed that we faced imbalances in the energy sector. Therefore, some of the sophistic arguments about the existence of vast fossil resources in Iran and the lack of need for nuclear energy really have no scientific or factual basis.
Meanwhile, the European Union's foreign policy chief has spoken with the foreign minister of the Islamic Republic for the first time since taking office. In a meeting with Abbas Araghchi, Kaja Kallas called for continued dialogue on the nuclear issue, and, referring to the Islamic Republic's support for Russia in the Ukraine war, and the situation of European citizens imprisoned in Iran, stated that the warmth of EU-Iran relations depends on progress in all areas. Let's go to the White House. Let's join our reporter, Samira Garai. Samira, what do we know about these recent tensions that seem to have increased? The whispers of confrontation compared to diplomacy?
Fardad, first let me say something about Mr. Beghai's remarks that you just aired. And I was listening to him saying that Iran's nuclear program is an old program and dates back to the 1970s. That's not the case. It dates back to the 1960s. Mr. Beghai should be aware of this story that in 1967, under the Atoms for Peace program, the United States provided enriched uranium to Mohammad Reza Shah Pahlavi. On July 10, 1969, the Iranian parliament ratified the NPT. In fact, the Islamic Republic joined the NPT. It was ratified, and it does not go back to the 1970s. And in 1979, the Islamic Republic, Mr. Khalid Bari, the foreign minister of the Islamic Republic, was executed. He executed the Shah's foreign minister because he went and established the Bushehr nuclear power plant. Despite the fact that Iran has vast oil resources, these points are noteworthy. Why? Because later Mr. Beghai says that according to the NPT, we have the right to enrich uranium, and we will not give up this right. The issue of maintaining uranium enrichment is very important for the Islamic Republic, and we see now that it is a significant issue. It has been subject to many crises, especially after Mr. Trump's statements yesterday, where he said his demand is for Iran's nuclear program to be completely abandoned. And later, of course, he mentioned that if it is for peaceful purposes, he could be open to proposals. These statements from yesterday and the discussion about the enrichment crisis, whether 0% or 3%, are now the focus of attention. This was also evident in Mr. Araghchi's remarks today. This morning, our time here in the eastern United States, Mr. Araghchi published a post on the social network X referring to Mr. Trump's statement that the Islamic Republic cannot have a program, cannot acquire nuclear weapons. Mr. Araghchi writes that if this is your condition and if you are pursuing such a thing, it is completely feasible. through negotiation, through an agreement, provided that the negotiations are based on mutual respect, based on common interests. But at the beginning of his remarks, Mr. Araki makes an effort to create a rift between the United States and Israel. And it seems like he is reminding his audience, which includes Mr. Trump and, generally the MAGA movement, that Israel has brought you nothing but huge expenses, and if you want to get into a conflict with the Islamic Republic, what you have spent so far is nothing compared to the costs you will have to bear later. At the end of his writing, he also refers to a minority that he says are Netanyahu first. This is a reference to the America First narrative and Mr. Trump's theory. He says those who prioritize Netanyahu are pursuing certain priorities, and now they are showing these priorities. Those priorities will not bring you peace and security. Clearly, Mr. Araki is trying to create a conflict, a tension, a disagreement between Israel and the United States. Earlier, last week, in another piece he published, he tried to do the same thing. And on the other hand, he says they are still pursuing negotiations. Mr. Baghai, the spokesperson for the Foreign Ministry, has made similar remarks, saying that we are waiting to see what the Omani side tells us about the path ahead regarding future meetings. On the other hand, the news website Axios says that the fourth round might be held at the end of this week. Al-Mayadeen says it might be held soon. Iranian sources are hopeful that it will be held fundamentally. On the other hand, we also have the issue of Europe. We have the issue of Ms. Kayas, who has spoken by phone and for the first time has replaced Mr. Borrell, Ms. Kayas. And her conversation with Mr. Araki was not limited to nuclear issues, but also included discussions about the actions of the Islamic Republic in military support for Russia, which is now a major focus for the Europeans. During the JCPOA period, the Islamic Republic did not provide such military support to Russia in its war with Europe. This is now important for the Europeans. The issue of Europeans who are imprisoned in Iran. The Islamic Republic has taken them hostage. All of these have been among the topics that Ms. Kayas has discussed with Mr. Araki. And we know that the Islamic Republic is also trying to talk with the 3 European countries. They wanted to talk last Friday, but it didn't happen. They have still left this door open. They are eager to know where the European side stands regarding the snapback mechanism.
Thank you, Samira Guriai, our reporter at the White House. Sarah Kermanian, an international relations expert from Brighton, and Alireza Nanvar Hajigi, a political analyst from Toronto, have joined us. Ms. Kermanian, I'll start with you. The language that Abbas Arachi used on Twitter, or the new X, in my opinion, is quite attention-grabbing. In bold English letters, in the same style that Mr. Trump tweets, he brings up trade figures to attract attention. How much do you really think the Iranian negotiator has understood Mr. Trump's language? And if they have, how much do you think they can use it in these negotiations?
Hello to you, Mr. Nambar. I think rather than saying they've understood the language, to the extent of using it in the same way, they might be getting a bit impatient with the deadlock that has been tweeted and are gradually moving towards that rhetoric. One of the events we've witnessed in the past few weeks is that there seems to be some tensions between Iran and Israel, which aren't being talked about much directly and even aren't being fully acknowledged. But anyway, for example, whether it's about the issues in Bandar Abbas, or perhaps now the Houthi attacks on Israel, each side can probably see or inquire about the other's involvement in some way. And ultimately, this really complicates the situation. As you mentioned, it might be that the Israeli side is having more influence. But I think a large part of this is that the relationship between Iran and the United States over all these years has created a structure that now seems to have put the negotiation process in a deadlock, a complicated situation. Something that many experts have pointed out. The United States is currently in a situation where, on one hand, if it wants to give time to Iran, there is the possibility that Iran might use this time to move towards also within the framework of the same issues that the U.S. itself has.
Ms. Kermani, unfortunately, your voice is very choppy. I'll take this opportunity to turn to Mr. Nambar Hajigi. Maybe my colleagues can disconnect the line and reconnect us again. Mr. Nambar Hajigi, after those cautious optimisms from both sides, it now seems that things are happening. Starting from the latest, the Houthi attack on Ben Gurion Airport in Tel Aviv, to the events happening in various parts of Iran, which raises the question of whether these negotiations, with these ongoing events, might be more fragile than before, and even lead to failure.
Hello to you, Mr. Farahzad, Ms. Kermani, and the viewers and listeners of International TV. Yes, as you mentioned, due to several obstacles, the negotiations are fragile for us. One of them is that Iran does not want to accept that it needs to discuss all topics in order to achieve a sustainable agreement. It does not pay attention to the experience of the JCPOA. It does not pay attention to the history of international relations, and it is always the case that when a regional power enters into dialogue and agreement with an international power, if there are serious challenges around it, and it cannot agree on a new order, this fragility always exists. That's the first point. The second point is that Iran thinks there is an illusion that if the nuclear issue is on the table, and Iran puts its economic proposals forward, Mr. Trump, due to his economic focus, can set aside other priorities that exist in Washington, such as the issue of Israel, regional issues, or missile issues, and come to an agreement with Iran. Well, this is also an illusion that is a miscalculation, and they do not realize that without resolving those issues, strategic investment from the West in Iran will not occur. In other words, they do not pay attention to the requirements of this matter, like the proposal Mr. Arachi made for the U.S. to build 19 power plants. But the requirement is that there should be no enrichment. The U.S. cannot do this for countries for which it builds power plants. In other words, they do not pay attention to these requirements. This point and this illusion is also very dangerous. These discussions about $1 trillion and $2 trillion stem from the same miscalculation that has been raised in Iranian political circles. Third point, in my opinion, in a situation like this, where negotiations are stalled, there is pessimism, a lack of trust, and you're dealing with a player like Mr. Trump who, as they say, plays outside the diplomatic norms. You need to act quickly, decisively, and have the courage for diplomatic initiatives. One of the things they could have done was to invite Mr. Witkoff to come to Tehran, have discussions with him about all the issues, and right there make a decision so that there was no need for Mr. Arachi to return to Tehran to see what the response was. They could have made the decision on the spot since he was in Tehran. Also, Mr. Witkoff himself had announced that he was willing to go to Iran. Second, they could meet with Mr. Trump, or have a phone call with Mr. Pezeshkian, or for instance, go to Saudi Arabia to meet Mr. Trump. These are diplomatic actions that, in a situation of mistrust and fragility, could help improve the atmosphere. Fourth point, Iran needs to have a roadmap that can truly resolve the issues. You see, with the issue of the destruction of Israel and regional matters, the U.S., meaning Mr. Trump, even if he wants to, cannot resolve this in a way that leads to a sustainable agreement. It can be just as fragile. Now, the fifth point is that actions can occur on the ground that can completely derail the negotiations. There have been previous experiences where actors can take actions that you are unaware of. Look at the Hormuz Island where they took the Karani ship. Mr. Soleimani's deal with the Americans was sabotaged. A part of the Revolutionary Guard acted against Mr. Soleimani, not against Khatami's government. It's the same now. It said that they seized a ship carrying weapons for the Yemenis, and then the action taken against the Israeli airport. These can easily disrupt the entire negotiations. And in the absence of courage, initiative, a roadmap, and the willingness to make a comprehensive deal, every small action can be fragile, as has been mentioned. These discussions that Mr. Arachi is having about business and such, these don't work. I said, they don't pay attention to the requirements. Another thing Mr. Arachi wants to do. He wants to tell Mr. Trump that Mr. Netanyahu is guiding you, because Mr. Trump wants to say that he doesn't take guidance from anyone. I make my own decisions. This is also a technique observed in these tweets.
Now, these side issues, as you say, are naturally important and can be influential, including small conflicts here and there. But it seems that there are major disagreements regarding the core details of the agreement itself, both regarding whether enrichment should be completely stopped in Iran and whether the missile issue should be included in the negotiations or not.
Look, regarding the nuclear issue, well, their demands have some snags and complications. Iran says if you want me not to build weapons, meaning their point is that I shouldn't build weapons, which Mr. Witkoff didn't reject in the first meeting. The first meeting and all that. It's that I will keep the 3.67, and probably for 20, 30 years, or maybe forever, and a number like 300, 400 kilos. Mr. Trump also, in the previous term, meaning during his first presidency, said the sunset clause should be 100 years. Practically, if Iran also accepts the additional protocol, there is no possibility for Iran to build a weapon, because it has to remove the 60% and also open its advanced sancti pujas. Therefore, if Iran wants to reach the position it is in now, it has 1 year. While currently, the Americans believe that if Iran wants to move towards testing a nuclear weapon, it can prepare its materials in a week or 10 days. At that time, it would take a year. So that's one point. But if this action is to be taken, with less than the JCPOA for Iran, it means they are taking more from Iran than the JCPOA. This means they are imposing more restrictions on Iran, because under the JCPOA, by 2023, which is 5 years from now, Iran would have been completely free, both in terms of the level of enrichment and the sancti pujas it could use. But now, with this situation, these restrictions will remain on Iran permanently or for a long term. And I doubt that Mr. Trump will back down. This is not a solution. Otherwise, this lack of overlap in their demands might lead to a lack of agreement. This is a point that seems to exist. Additionally, regarding the issue of Israel and regional matters, if Iran does not want to change its policy, even if an agreement is reached, those issues can still be disruptive. In any case, the negotiations are in a fragile state and require a reassessment from Iran, courage and action, and at the same time, it must accept that if it does not enter into an agreement, even if a military conflict does not occur, a series of fundamental pressures, whether economic, diplomatic, cyber, or operational, might be applied against Iran, which I doubt the Iranian government has the capacity to withstand such situations.
How do you see this delay end? Temporary halt in the negotiations? Because they were supposed to negotiate on Saturday, there's no news for now. The next timing is also not very clear.
Look, in the last session, apparently the Iranians put their economic proposals on the table and demanded a response from the US regarding, though legal, economic guarantees. Meaning, if Iran accepts these limitations, how can it benefit from its economic interests? What steps will the US take? The US was supposed to answer these questions last Saturday, but it was canceled. If they don't want to hold the session, in my opinion, then the issue, I also think the session will be held. The Americans might say at that time, as they say, we've received your list of demands. In the first session, Mr. Witkoff received the list from the Iranians. In the previous session, they also had some technical discussions, but the technical discussions were supposed to be this time regarding nuclear issues, which did not happen. In this session, Iran might say that under no circumstances will we accept zero enrichment, but we might offer you more economic benefits if you move towards zero enrichment. We have to see how Iran decides. It seems that Iran has now set zero enrichment as a red line and is not willing to accept it. But it's not clear if they are willing. The limit is not defined. Are they willing for it to lead to conflict, to war? Because this is a project that neither the society supports, nor does everyone within the power structure support it, and it doesn't even have a basis in terms of the country's territorial integrity, because enrichment has no practical use. I mean, even if we consider it to have a security application, it definitely doesn't work with this model, because it involves Iran and other risks that we are witnessing day by day. Even if we don't consider the sabotage in Bandar Abbas or other actions that have occurred as sabotage.
Thank you, Mr. Nambar Hajigi. Thank you, and I apologize to Ms. Kermanian for the interruption in our connection with her. You are watching the 24 program from Iran International. Oh, Israel says that its air force, in response to the Houthi missile attack on Ben Gurion Airport on Sunday, has carried out attacks against this group's positions in coordination with the United States. These attacks come as the Yemeni Houthis have announced that in response to the expansion of Israeli operations in Gaza, they intend to continue attacks on Israeli airports to place the country under an aerial blockade. The Houthis said the recent missile attacks near Israel's Ben Gurion Airport were in support of the Palestinians in Gaza. The Houthis also warned international airlines to cancel their flights to Israeli airports.
The Yemeni Armed Forces.
The Yemeni Armed Forces call on all international airlines to take the content of this statement seriously from the moment of its release and to cancel all scheduled flights to the airports of the criminal enemy to ensure the safety of their planes and crews.
Arash Aliyah, our reporter, has joined us from Congress. Eyes on the phone. I see that he's probably following the latest clashes between the Houthis and Israel. Tell us about the latest developments. What have the Israelis done? How extensive is the damage caused by the Houthis?
It seems that the news is just now slowly starting to populate on our aggregator. Just as you said, I was reading. So far, the Israelis have confirmed 10 attacks on the port of Hodeidah, which is one of the main ports under Houthi control. Barak Ravid, a reporter for Axios, has reported that all these attacks were coordinated with American forces in the region. And the analyses. In Washington during this short period, at least from what I've seen in a few, analyses on the social network X indicate that this sends a clear message to the Islamic Republic that the US and Israel have military coordination with each other. And this is also consistent with the history of various American wars. When you look at it, the Americans are always looking to form coalitions or alliances. From their movies, where the sheriff always goes to others, they try to gather several people to join them for big wars like the First Iraq War, the Second Iraq War. Americans try as much as possible not to enter a war alone. And these recent attacks carried out by the Israelis are in response to the missile attacks by the Houthis. Part of the analyses now in the press, which was before the Israeli attack on al-Hudaydah, I was reading. For example, Newsweek has written a detailed report on the effectiveness of American forces' attacks on Yemen, stating that these are air bombings. Also, Yemen is a country that has been under air bombardment for a long time. And truly, there aren't many targets left in this country. Saudi Arabia, which had been bombing there for a long time, and now, during President Biden's term, we saw the Pentagon carry out attacks on Yemen. Since March 15th, we also see that President Trump's administration is attacking the Houthis, and not many. Significant military structures remain under the Houthis' control that have been left untouched. However, the Houthi group's attacks on Israel have not only not decreased, but have intensified over the past 4 days. The latest attack they carried out was on Ben Gurion Airport, which some publications, like the Telegraph, reported was a hypersonic missile. These are clearly technologies and capabilities that the Yemenis do not possess on their own. These are technologies that the Islamic Republic provides to the Yemenis. And currently, discussions are ongoing in Washington about how to expand the ways of sending these weapons to the Houthis.
Right now, I'm seeing on the Israel Gateways channel that 20 Israeli fighter jets participated in the current attacks against the Houthis in Yemen. In this latest attack, it seems they got the green light from the Americans and informed them, but they did not receive operational assistance from the Americans. But well, we know that the Americans themselves also have separate operations against the Houthis. It might be one of the only fronts where America, despite Mr. Trump's peace-seeking stance, as many say, is very involved. How successful has America really been in targeting Houthi positions during the time they've been at war with them?
Look, in my opinion, we need to take a step back. Let's not forget the incident that happened among senior members of the Trump administration, which became known as Signal Gate. If you remember, we came on your program several times to talk about it. If you read that chat again, it's all about the discussions among senior members of the Trump administration on whether to attack the Houthis or not. There were two groups. They are clearly divided into two different ideologies. One group was led by Mr. J.D. Vance, who opposed attacking the Houthis, saying it was like giving a free concession to Europeans who are not grateful to America. And Mr. Vance kept saying there that he didn't know if they realized how much this action we want to take, meaning attacking the Houthis, contradicts President Trump's policy towards Europe. The reality is that most of the ships passing through the Red Sea, or that area, and were being attacked, were either European ships, or some of them were Chinese ships. We rarely saw American ships or ships related to American companies being attacked there. The main reason is that American trade through that area is very minimal. Most of the trade is Chinese to Europe or Europeans to China, passing through that area. And that faction of Republicans, like Mr. J.D. Vance, opposes it because they feel it's giving an advantage to China and Europe without America, gaining much in this regard. Currently, the media close to that part of the MAGA movement report daily on how costly this war is, how many missiles the Houthis are firing, some of which cost no more than a few $100,000. Meanwhile, the U.S. Navy has to fire missiles. That costs $2 to $3 million to shoot them down. And it is still unclear whether the Trump administration has any specific strategy after these airstrikes and bombings, because the Houthis have been under aerial bombardment for a long time now. But clearly, the Americans have not yet been able to significantly reduce the Houthis' offensive capabilities.
Thank you. Arash Aliyai, our correspondent in the U.S. Congress. Ben Sabi, a researcher on Iran and Israel from Tel Aviv, and Trauska Sadeghi, a journalist from Paris, have joined us. Mr. Sabi, the Houthis targeted Ben Gurion Airport in Tel Aviv from a distance of 2,000 kilometers. If it had been 200 meters further, it could have caused a very large disaster if it had been inside the terminal. The distance is also significant. It's not like the rocket launches by Hamas and Hezbollah. They sent the missiles from 2,000 kilometers away and almost hit the target. Is this creating a new security environment for Israel? And to what extent should the Israeli government really consider the Houthis a major problem now?
Hello and good evening to you, dear friend, and the viewers. Yes, even before the launch of this missile and its impact on Ben Gurion Airport, which can really be said to have hit a more precise target for the first time. Even before that, there was a lot of talk about the need to prevent Houthi operations, because they really increased their operations in recent weeks and created a kind of anxiety that this war is happening again. And when this missile hit the target, the discussion arose that in fact, it's not just the Houthis who are the issue, but the name of the Islamic Republic came up more and more. And what we see in the last 24 hours is that Israel is really speaking in a different way. If we see now that yes, they first targeted a location in Yemen itself at the Houthi headquarters and attacked This is because they need to create an initial and immediate reaction. But the discussion is really about hitting the head of the snake or the head of the dragon. This topic has become much more prevalent. And what is being talked about? Much more among Israeli statesmen, in the Israeli army, and on Israeli television, is what our stance is with the Islamic Republic. How long are we going to allow them to continue in this manner? They still use their hands and arms in other places, even though Hezbollah and Hamas almost no longer exist. But the Houthis are really causing these troubles. Of course, Israel's delayed response also had an impact on the Houthis in this regard. They launched missiles for about 2 weeks. Each time it was prevented, but there was no attack. Well, like a soccer game, when one team keeps attacking the other side, and the other side only defends, eventually, one day they will concede a goal. This is a law of nature. Because of the issue that arose yesterday, it woke Israel up a bit. But more attention was directed towards the Islamic Republic itself. And this is something that might be a variable in the equations we've seen in recent weeks.
Ms. Sadeghi, give us an insight into the logic that the Houthis are following. Because when it comes to Hezbollah and Hamas, it's more or less understandable where they stand and why they might attack Israel so much. But the Houthis have a significant geographical distance. They don't have direct engagement, and it's not like they've just launched a couple of missiles. It seems like they are fully committed. They are continuously launching missiles at Israeli territory and attacking ships passing through the Red Sea. What really is their logic, at least from their own perspective?
Mr. Farahzad, the issue is that, from my point of view, it has more of a propaganda aspect. Why do I say this? Because the military and factual reality tells us that the Houthis of Yemen, or Ansar Allah, do not have the practical and extensive capability to impose an aerial blockade on Israel. It's natural for Israel to take this as a serious threat. Bin Sabi, as an Israeli citizen, has the right to consider this a security concern, to describe it this way, and for Israel to form a committee to respond. And of course, we should also be waiting for responses. But well, it has a propaganda aspect. From what perspective do I say this? Because, well, the developments in Gaza are still ongoing. We have the majority of the resistance axis groups. We see that all of them have either been defeated, weakened, like Hamas and Hezbollah, or forced into silence. For example, the Iraqi groups. As a result, it's natural for the Houthis in Yemen, miles away, to occasionally show themselves and say that we are committed and loyal to the ideals of Gaza and Palestine. And Hamas immediately issues a commendatory statement for them. Another issue is that, as a journalist, I have knowledge of the resistance axis groups, which include the Yemeni Houthis, and I have observed their actions in Iraq and Syria over the past years. But anyway, there's always another signal in the negotiation process. It's always like that. When the Islamic Republic of Iran enters a specific situation, it uses its cards, meaning its arms throughout the region, to warn the US not to succumb to Israeli pressures during these negotiations, or to accept its demands. Another very important issue is that the pattern of multiple attacks, or the multi-pronged attack against Israel, has failed. Currently, as you mentioned, the only group remaining is the Houthis in Yemen, right, from several. In the past period, it has been mentioned, we are seeing the reports. They are continuously attacking. But let's also accept this. In any case, there are very extensive operational obstacles. There is this geographical distance. Israel's air defense systems are still operational. From dozens of missiles. It's natural. Let's consider it natural for one to hit the ground. Not that we should underestimate this, but well, We've seen before that the issue is Israel's air defense system has been able to counter all of these. Another issue is that there is intelligence support for Israel as well. Anyway, everyone is aware of the coalition that was formed. And after that, there is a different perspective within the countries of the region themselves. Many Arab countries are currently against escalating tensions and still see this as an effort by the Islamic Republic of Iran. But anyway, it can be controlled, and they can manage it. The issues at hand are that we have to wait for the outcome of today's Israeli attacks to see if they will indeed attack them in a manner similar to the attacks on Hezbollah in Lebanon that broke their back. Can they target their infrastructure? Or, in my opinion, the Israelis should ask the Americans what the result of your 1,200 attacks on the Houthis in Yemen has been, given that they can still attack us. This conveys the message that the operations by the US and the UK against the Houthis have not been very effective.
Mr. Seti, Ben Gurion Airport is a very important airport for Israel. It's practically their only major international airport where foreign flights arrive. Now, if we set aside the current situation, if the Houthis really intend to constantly target Israeli airports as they have threatened, what would that mean on the ground for Israelis, for their trade, and for their relations with the rest of the world? And Israel constantly threatens and says that it's Iran that's the head of this. Octopus and the Houthis are just a proxy group. They say this in words, but in practice, we see that every time the Houthis have attacked, the response has only been within Yemeni territory. Do you think these attacks on airports might change this equation?
Yes. Let me just add one sentence about the behavior of the Houthis to Ms. Trotsky, that their behavior, psychologically, seems much closer to that of the Hamas, and in terms of martyrdom, it's as if they have nothing to lose. And another issue that caught a lot of attention in Israel regarding the Houthis is that on their emblem, they always have slogans written behind them saying death to America, death to Israel, and curse the Jews, not Israel. Curse the Jews. This is something that is really fundamental for them. We are truly surprised by the extent of their hostility, because there really hasn't been an issue between the Houthis and Israel or the Jews. Even Jews live there. And this is an issue that I think will not end because of the deep-seated hostility they have towards Israel and the Jews. Regarding Ben Gurion Airport and bringing the name of the Islamic Republic to the table, you see, the issue of Ben Gurion Airport and its closure is not something that Israel can accept or take an alternative approach to, or set aside and sacrifice. Ben Gurion Airport is the main gateway for entry and exit in Israel, and nowhere else in Israel can replace it because it is located in the center of the country. For this reason, even if flights are canceled, some logistical issues may arise. As in the past year and a half, everyone has become experienced, and these issues have occurred. For months, these flights were not available from foreign companies, and now they have returned, and once again an issue has arisen, but Israelis have gotten used to this situation. However, this time, as I mentioned before, it seems that Israel does not want to easily let this matter go in the past 24 hours. The more important issue in today's attack is the increased coordination between Israel and the United States in this attack. And I think Israel is also convincing the Americans that, look, we really need to go after the Islamic Republic. These negotiations that you are conducting are not very beneficial, as it has also been halted, and any benefits given to the Islamic Republic have not been effective. They do not back down from their positions. I think this threat, just as the Hezbollah issue, turned from a threat to an opportunity for Israel and led to the destruction of Hezbollah. Even led to the destruction of the Syrian regime. Israel can use this issue to turn the fundamental threat of the Islamic Republic into an opportunity to deliver a severe blow to the Islamic Republic itself.
Thank you, both. Ben Sabi, researcher on Iran and Israel from Tel Aviv, and Trotsky Sadeghi, journalist from Paris. The Israeli newspaper Israel Hayom says that Benjamin Netanyahu, the prime minister of this country, is dissatisfied with Donald Trump's policies regarding the Middle East. According to Israel Hayom, Netanyahu has said in private conversations with his close associates that although Trump has appropriate positions on Syria and Iran, in bilateral meetings, his actions do not align with his statement. Netanyahu is particularly concerned about Trump's support for Recep Tayyip Erdogan, the president of Turkey, in his efforts to dominate Syria, as well as his decision to negotiate nuclear issues with Iran. Ibrahim Broshandel, a former diplomat and expert on national security and strategic issues, is with us from Washington, D.C. Mr. Broshandel, this is not the first report of this kind. Now, we don't really know the accuracy and details of it, but it's clear that some of Mr. Trump's actions, and probably those around him, are not exactly what Mr. Netanyahu is looking for and dealing with. For example, the Islamic Republic. However, it seems that both sides are still speaking diplomatically about each other. How likely do you think it is that these reported behind-the-scenes discontentments will continue in the background? Or will they eventually come out and confront each other?
Yes, thank you very much for inviting me, Narcissus. Hello to you and your wonderful viewers. Look, the cooperation between Israel and the United States is ongoing on 3 levels: military, security, and political. On the first 2 levels, military and security, we have not seen any disruptions so far. The United States has firmly supported Israel's interests and the threats to its territorial integrity. But on the political level, we do see this duality reflected in the media or quoted from Mr. Netanyahu. The reason is that, firstly, the scope of the United States' interests in the Middle East is forming to be broader than what Israel is pursuing in the region, especially after Mr. Trump came into office. The issue here is that 2 factors can place Israel in a position where this complete alignment in the political direction and with Mr. Trump can be achieved. One is the continuation and halt of nuclear negotiations, and the second is the continuation of Houthi attacks on Israel, which would lead Trump, considering the warnings he has given to the Islamic Republic about not attacking American ships, to focus this time on preserving the territorial integrity and defending the territorial sovereignty of Israel. There, in fact, he would issue a warning. These warnings have indeed been given. The Houthis currently have a situation where, considering the elimination of Hezbollah and Hamas, they are merely trying to maintain the region in the same state of chaos and military stress that the Islamic Republic is pursuing. I believe that Israel is a very covert yet active player in the negotiations between the United States and the Islamic Republic, and it has had its impact so far. Therefore, it can be said that if the Islamic Republic is in 2 situations, halting negotiations and continuing the Houthi attacks, which I mentioned to you a month and a half ago in the first program I attended. After the elimination of the leaders of the resistant groups, the second-tier leaders took over, the operational leaders, any kind of connection between this Houthi network and the Islamic Republic can pose risks for the Islamic Republic as the primary suspect from the perspective of the United States and Israel. So, I think that over time, this military and security alignment between Israel and the United States will become closer due to the political rifts that occur between the Islamic Republic and the United States.
Very briefly, in under a minute, could you say if there is a scenario where Israel might want to surprise the United States? For example, a unilateral attack on the Islamic Republic.
Israel could take such an action if the Islamic Republic's behavior, which so far has been limited to declaring confrontational stances, moves a step further, and there are factors and evidence that highlight the direct involvement of the Islamic Republic in supporting the Houthis. In that situation, Israel could carry out operations inside Iran. These would be more military centers rather than nuclear ones, because the responsibility for the consequences of a nuclear attack is very damaging, and Israel does not want to take such a risk at that level.
Thank you very, very much. Ebrahim Rose-Handel, former diplomat and expert on national security and strategic issues from Washington, D.C., was with us. And thank you for watching the 24 Tonight program. You can watch this program again a little later on Iran International's YouTube.